Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be going over the BMW E60 M5 common problems. So let's get on to this video.
Goddamn, get it done, will ya? When the blow up now, everybody's so unusual with it. Shit. But said times in his rhymes, cause his memories. We running through New York, so you know.
Okay guys, so today's video is going to be about the E60 M5 common problems. Now, some of this will apply for your normal E60, but the majority of this is going to apply for your normal E60 M5s. And this is purely because a lot of people don't make a video on the common problems of the E60 M5 and what problems these cars actually suffer with and what they can suffer with. And obviously there's a lot of people in the market looking to purchase one of these cars and don't know what they should be looking for and what they shouldn't be buying if they come across any with these issues. Now, that's not to say you shouldn't buy it, it's just actually saying if you don't have the skills and you're going to take it to a dealer, to a garage to have every little thing fixed, then the car isn't for you. There is minor things that will need repairing, and you probably can do it at home if you're skilled enough and wanting to put the time in yourself and learn and do that, because there's a lot of videos these days showing you everything and the need to know on how to fix these cars. So I'm going to run over a load of things and show you things you need to be looking for when you purchase an E60 M5.
Okay, so the first one is the power fold mirrors on the M5, and also you'll have these on the M6. Now, these are known for the motors to break, especially in freezing cold weather. Now, if you're planning to buy one of these and you live in a cold climate, my best advice would be not to retract the mirrors up. Now, I have the mirrors on the key to go up on the key, but that's something I do not recommend if you live in the States or any cold climate area, because what will happen is it will break the motors inside. Now, you can order a new motor kit, but it's not cheap, and neither is a replacement wing mirror for these cars either. So my best advice would be to leave them down. If you're going to keep it in a shop or you live in a mild climate, then it's fine to retract them. The other thing is they can get water ingress inside them and on the rubbers where they come down, which can cause them to squeak like this one. What I end up doing is spraying silicone WD-40 in there, which actually stopped it making them noises on the E60 M5 power fold mirrors. Now, this doesn't just go for the E60 M5. Now, the normal E60 comes with power fold mirrors as well, and they'll do the same thing. So if you have them as well, don't, whatever you do, power fold them in a cold climate, because you end up breaking the motors on the electric mirrors. The next one, which again applies for the E60 and the E60 M5, is the sunroof. Now, the sunroof itself can be finicky. It's a known cause on BMW 60s. The rubbers can also perish all around here, and you can end up with water getting inside the car. Now, these, what ends up happening is they come off their sliders, and the sliders will break that are in the sunroof itself as it slides backwards and forwards, and it can actually drop down. What you need to do is you can either repair that if your one isn't cracked or broken or worn out, or you can buy a new kit and actually repair the sunroof. It is a known weak point on these, and a lot of people end up having to redo them, especially in hot countries where they're left outside. They'll rot all the rubbers around here, and a lot of people like to leave it open, and where you're in a hot country, you're going to use the sunroof a lot more than what people do in colder climate countries. Therefore, it's constantly opening and closing. My best advice is, if that happens, is just to replace them, which is the arms on the sunroof which support it to open and close, because otherwise what will end up happening is you'll go to open it again, it will drop down and you won't be able to fix it. So I do recommend to actually change them if they actually break.
The next one on the E60 M5 is the paddle shifters. Now, this is a common problem on these as well. A lot of people end up having this problem where these break, and I think that's because a lot of people hit them too hard when changing gear. They flick it too hard, so it ends up breaking them or snapping them. It is a common problem. It's usually more prone to this one, which is the upshift, not the downshift one. They end up breaking this one right here. They're not expensive to buy, and these days a lot of people are changing them to carbon fiber. They're very easy to replace as well. If you look around here into the steering wheel, you'll see they go straight up there, and they hold on by two Torx bolts inside here behind the
airbag and behind the frame itself. I would make sure to try and be careful with these because they are known weak point on the E60 M5, and they do break. Many people have broke them, and therefore it is worth to be very careful. You don't have to slam them to change gear. Remember, these are just basically sensors sending it to the gearbox to change the gear. Hitting it harder is not going to make it change any faster. That's all done by the electronics, not by you and how quick you're hitting the actual paddle on the shifter. So just be careful. No matter how hard you hit it, it's not going to shift any quicker. But I do know they're a weak point and many people do break them. Now the next one on these is the headlights. Now if many people don't know, the headlights on the E60 M5 is the only car that come with the xenon headlights. Well, you call them xenons, but they're not as bright as actual xenons, and they're not bright enough. But these also have the adaptive headlights, but not the cornering lights. So, you know, they just move into position everywhere you're going. You know, the cornering lights are much better on the LCI models, but these have a tendency to actually break the auto leveling adjustment inside. It's a very known issue on them, and my best advice is, if they do break the auto leveling adapter inside the headlights, is to just upgrade to the LCI kit, because it's not worth buying another headlight for this car. The LCI retrofit is very easy to do, and it's something I am doing on this car. I've already got most of the bits in for this car already to actually do that. So I've got the LM2 module, I've got the rear lights, I'm just waiting for the headlights to come, and we're going to be changing this over to the LCI headlights and tail lights as well. Need to upgrade it because it's something I've been wanting to do. As I said, there's a lot more parts coming for this car that I'm going to be doing. I want to get this car fully updated, and it's something I'm looking forward to doing. But as I said, it is a known weak point on them, and it was a known weak point even on the Xenons on the other E60s, where they break the level adjustment, especially again in cold weather when they're trying to level themselves out. And therefore, make sure you actually check them. But if they are broken, just make sure you just upgrade to the LCI conversion. Yes, it's expensive, but at the same time, they're more reliable, and you get the cornering lights, and it looks so much better. You also get the welcome lights, which make this car look a lot better, especially when you unlock it. Now the next one is a lot of the engine mechanicals on the S85, on the E60 M5, and what to look for when you come to purchase one of these. So a lot of the time, most people will sell these with either the rod bearings done or the rod bearings not done. Now there's many parts that fail on this engine, and I'm going to go over a lot of them with you right now, and things that I've actually had to replace, which a lot of people didn't know. So the first thing on these, of course, is the rod bearings. Now, if many of you guys don't know, the rod bearings will make a clacking sound. This is when a lot of people try and get rid of them when the rod bearings actually fail, or when they're failing. A lot of people get rid of them. They won't give you a good full working V10. No, most people like to give it once it's broken and completely gone. If you hear any knocking sound coming from the bottom, avoid the engine. The rod bearings on these need to be changed every 80 to 100,000 miles. Something I do recommend. I've had these done on this with the ACL rod bearings and the high clearance ones, but still it's something I will still be getting done again at 100k if I've still got the car. The next one on these is the Vanos line. Now the Vanos line is critical. It runs on to the Vanos pump, which is inside, located where the sump is, and it's worth having it done while the bottom end is dropped. A lot of people like to leave that, then they'll put everything back together after having the rod bearings done, and then the Vanos line will give issues. And you have Vanos codes that controls the Vanos pressure. It goes on to the accumulator itself, and therefore with the line splitting or cracking or weakening, you end up with a lot of Vanos codes, and it can actually damage the engine and affect the performance of the car. The next one on these is the ionic control modules, which is down here, which live down here. I've got a video up showing how to replace them. Now, they were way ahead of technology when they first come out. Now the ionic control modules, the whole idea of them is to deliver the current successfully to all the ignition coils. Bearing in mind we've got 10 cylinders, the ionic control modules takes the power and regenerates it and sends it into a signal for the ignition coils at the higher RPM. That's what the ionic control modules are for. They have adapters on them, plugs, which run from the DME, but the ionic control modules are there for the extra current that's needed at the top RPM on these cars. They do fail, and what will happen is you'll end up with misfires. You'll replace your ignition coils, and you'll end up having misfires on 2 cylinders and not know what's going on. Usually it's your ionic control module. I have replaced both of these, and I've even got spares at home just in case one was to go out again, but they are a common problem, and I do believe to change them if you get an E60 M5, because they will go out and they're not cheap. They're about £80 each, used, and very expensive from the dealer, but they are used, which a lot of people don't believe me. People think they're for the Vanos, which they're not. They are used for the ignition timing and the ignition system itself. I actually figured that out because nobody on YouTube had actually done it. And when they go out, they'll cause misfires on all the cylinders, all the banks as well. Sometimes it can be all 5, sometimes it can be 3 of them, and you'll think it's the ignition coils, spark plugs, and it's not, and you will still have it there. They can get bad and bad as the time progresses, and with heat they get worse and worse. The next one on these is the ignition coils and the spark plugs. Now, these engines like to eat through their ignition coils. I therefore recommend to make sure you overhaul the whole ignition coil system, which I've done already. I replaced all 10, but the other day one went out again. Luckily I had spares from good working ones from when I previously stripped it, so I just replaced it with one from them. But I do recommend to replace all the spark plugs, and it's not a hard job on this. It's quite easy to actually replace all the spark plugs and the ignition coils. I've done it already. I overhauled all when I actually got this car, but it is worth noting to make sure you replace all them, because they can give misfires also, and they're not running right. The ignition coils are not cheap. They are expensive for the genuine ones, and I would advise you to make sure you use the genuine ignition coils for these cars. Do not use Chinese junk, because the car will not run properly. The next one on these is all the pulleys and the belts down there. Now, the pulleys and the belts and all the idler pulleys, very easy to replace once the fan's out, and it's something you can do yourself at home. I would be careful to make sure one of the bolts ain't stripped down there on one of the idler pulleys. I had that exact problem on this when we took the engine apart to do the rod bearings, where someone had turned it completely wrong and didn't pull it in its thread, and I had to have the thread redone because the person actually messed it completely up. So I therefore recommend to actually be careful when you put your pulleys on and make sure the bolt is in correctly, or you can strip out the idler pulleys. Now, the belts ain't really a common problem, but they can go out, and when they do go out, they will cause a lot of issues. You end up with a squeaking sound. I did have a squeaking sound on this when I was turning the steering, and that's one of the reasons why I did change it over myself. It wasn't the one with the threaded bolt. That was done by a previous garage before I got this car, and obviously I had to have the thread redone, which we did have redone on this car. The next one on these is the Vanos solenoids. Now, a lot of you, if you use ISTA for this car, will probably notice you'll end up with your Vanos codes or Vanos low pressure codes. Now, a lot of people will ask me all the time to replace the Vanos solenoids. Now, there is no need to replace the Vanos solenoids on these. A lot of people ain't aware of this, but you can actually buy O-rings and replace the O-rings. All that ends up happening is the O-rings perish over time, which sit around the solenoids, and they lose oil pressure. You can take them out and redo the O-rings yourself. It's not a hard job, and it's something that can be done at home. You'll have to drain all the coolant, take the fan out, take all the pipes off, and there is a special tool to actually get to them, because the bolts are facing upwards and they're very, very tiny and very easy to lose. So I would advise you to buy 8 new bolts, which you can find online before you even start the job, because of that reason. But if you are getting and you see your solenoids not functioning correctly, my best advice would be to replace all the O-rings on the solenoids. You do not have to buy new solenoids. Now, the next one on these is right down there, which is the injectors. Now, a lot of people speak about these sticking open. Obviously, touch wood, I haven't come across that issue as yet, but they are known to stick open. Now, when these cars were new, and I repeat new, a lot of people during warranty had the issue with the injector staying open. Now, I don't know if BMW should have recall and changed their batch of injectors. I'm not sure, but they are a known weak point as well that I would highly check for, because of them sticking open. They can actually hydrolock the whole engine and obviously wipe out the whole cylinder, can make it too clean and destroy the whole engine, and therefore you don't want that. So therefore it's something I would check when buying this car, because that's another problem that can happen. I'm not saying it won't, I'm saying it can happen, but it's not something that I've come across or heard from a lot of people. A lot of people on my channel tell me to change all the injectors, something I might look into doing, but at this point in time the engine steam is running perfectly and I haven't had any issues, but it's something you need to be aware of as well. The next one this car likes to go through, and there's two of them, there's one there and one there. And because there's two of them, they do like to go out. They can get gunked up from oil residue and just dirt. And a lot of people believe in just clean them and it will make it work again. But to be fair, these are cheap enough to actually buy new. And if they were to go out, my best advice would be to just buy them new. Now there is a tune you can to delete them. Many people already know of that. You can delete both of them. But I don't believe in deleting something that was engineered to run with. I believe it can actually cause more harm than actually good to the engine. That is the cheap way out of owning this car. And if you have to be cheap to not own this car, then you shouldn't own it, full stop. If you're having to remove parts and delete this and delete that, you just shouldn't own this car. It's not the car for you. They're not expensive at all. They're only like 60, 70 pound each, and new I think they're about 130 pound, which I don't believe is expensive for this car. And this car deserves the best treatment possible, considering it's a legendary engine. There will never be another V10 engine, so give it the best care and the best parts possible to maintain it, because it will reward you in years to come. The next one on these is right down here, and I'll just state right now, is the CCVs. Now, the crankcase ventilation PCVs, there's 4 of them on this car, but you can only get to the 2 on the valve cover. The other 2 sit right down deep on the engine block itself, and to get to them you'd have to remove the gearbox. They are a known weak point, and I therefore would recommend to actually change them. I will have a video up showing how to actually change them, and you guys can go and check it out. How to actually replace them is very, very important that you change them, because they can stop up with oil and get clogged, and therefore cause your V10 to burn more oil than actually needed. Now, if many guys don't know, these engines already drink oil. It's normal. But if it's drinking excessive oil, it will be your PCVs on the way out, and therefore they're very small, they're round, and they're a job that is worth tackling and doing the moment you get your V10, to make sure that everything is perfectly. And remember, oil is crucial for this engine. This engine eats its own oil, and not only does it eat its own oil, it strives on engine oil, and therefore it has to be at its maximum optimum efficiency to run beautifully and to keep the Vanos in time. The Vanos strives off the oil pressure, and therefore you want to make sure you get them CCVs done, make sure they're perfectly functioning before the engine gets damaged. So I do believe to replace them. The other one is located where that tube's going there, it goes straight into the valve cover. Again, we'll be doing a video showing you how to access them at a later date. Okay guys, so the next one is, as you'll see here, is the fuel tank. Now, if many of you guys have seen my previous video, under the wheel arch liner lives a charcoal canister. Now, what that's responsible for is when you overfill your fuel tank, the filter inside will catch the excess fuel and will recycle it back to the fuel tank. Now, they do like to go 40, and as you would have seen in my previous video, you would have seen that I had to replace that, and someone had been very cheap and took off the pipe inside of the charcoal canister to try and be cheap and get away with it. And that was for the scavenger line, which runs from the tank back to the fuel system in the front of the car, in the engine, back to the evap valves. Now, that was causing a fuel pressure adaptation light. Many people ain't aware of that, a part that lives under the wheel arch, but it's for emissions, and it does get clogged up, and it is a serviceable part, which BMW don't tell you, every 80,000 miles. I have just replaced it. It's a very, very easy part to replace, very straightforward, and I do recommend to change it if you're buying an E60 M5. As I said, it is crucial you change that, because it can cause a lot of lights, and you never know, you might go under there and find out that someone has actually disconnected it just to be cheap and to save themselves a few quid of actually buying the unit itself to replace it. Mine's been replaced now. I'm very happy with that, and it's actually stopped the fuel pressure light coming on. The car runs a lot better than what it did, and I didn't know that that pipe was actually off from someone actually being cheap. So as you see there guys, I've now gone over all the E60 M5 common problems. Now, I know a lot of you are going to start mentioning about the modules on these cars, but if I'm honest with you, the E60 M5 didn't really have any module problems because they were fitted differently to the other E60s. Now, this car is a solid car, and there's not really much to fail on this car as such. Majority of the stuff is all mechanical and not really electronical on these cars. As I said, the electronics were built very, very well on the E60 M5, and bearing in mind they were under warranty, and because of the price people paid, anyone with issues would run straight back to BMW and get it sorted. Obviously there was problems with the iDrive units at the start, but BMW corrected that, and anybody who had an E60 M5 would have had it on extended warranty, and even if they bought it second hand from another trader, it would have had extended warranty, which would cover the bill for BMW. So therefore people were having the parts replaced. These are the most common problems on the E60 M5 you will come across, and I therefore recommend that if you are in the market to purchase an E60 M5, these are the things you need to look for, and these are the common problems to look for. Your best tech tool and your best diagnostic tool for these cars will be ISTA. That is the best diagnostic tool you can possibly have running an E60 M5. If you don't have that, you need to get that, and it's something I do provide and I do sell as well. Bearing in mind, these cars will not function correctly on your cheap normal scanner, and you will not be able to do your day-to-day routines on these cars, and that's why people give these cars a bad names, because they buy them and then try and buy a £50 scanner and think they're going to find the cause of the issue on these cars. These cars need a lot of their adaptions reset, even when you change the clutch, even when you touch the engine. A lot of the things need to be reset, bled, and your normal scanner isn't going to do that. So I hope this video is going to help a lot of you guys with the common problems on the E60 M5. Thank you very much for watching. It's BMW Dr. Dean here, and goodbye.